Good morning, One Mosaic Church. It is good to be back with you again, and we are getting close to having our first gathering back here, outside, outdoor drive-in service, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, and we are excited just to see some of your faces. But today we are going to do something a little off script, a little different. We just felt like God was giving us an opportunity to really speak into just the climate that we find our country in right now. And so I invited this week John Torrence and Keane to come in and just film a discussion with me, addressing just where we find our nation right now. Just really hoping that we can get a little better perspective from other people's vantage point, that we can see the world maybe a little more accurately through John's angle of seeing things as a black man, but we can also see the tension, the struggle, and the goodness of Keane as an officer in our city who works every single day to keep us safe and just to protect us and to serve us. So we wanted to enter into that, and ultimately just wanting our faith family and hopefully hundreds of others to see how this conversation can take place in a right way, in a respectful way, in a holy way, in a God-honoring way, in a way that gives humanity the dignity that we deserve on both sides of the spectrum and everywhere in between, but entering into a healthy conversation. So we're going to jump into that in just a minute, and then we actually are not going to do any video worship today, just because this discussion that we had is about 45 minutes long, and we just want to let you guys sit and listen and engage with that. So I want to do a couple just reminders and announcements for a few minutes here before we take a second and pray and just turn over to this video that we recorded. So the first one is this. If you have been journeying with us through Brighter Contenders via Zoom in these last couple months of quarantine, you know that we are now entering into our summer schedule, which is what we do every summer, and we just go to a once a month gathering. And so Bride will meet every third Wednesday. So the third Wednesday in June, the third Wednesday in July, and the third Wednesday in August. Our ladies will come together. Those locations are to be determined, but it will be from 7 to 9, and those will be in-person gatherings, more than likely outdoors, just doing something fun at one of the ladies' houses or maybe here at Mosaic. And then for the guys, we're going to do every fourth Wednesday through the summer months. So we'll meet the fourth Wednesday in June, the fourth Wednesday in July, and the fourth Wednesday in August. And same thing, we will let you know what those locations are going to be and what activities will be taking place, but those will be in-person gatherings. We also want to let you know that we want to just continue to encourage our house churches to continue to be meeting and just doing that as people are comfortable with, and to meet throughout the summer and just continue to invest in each other as you guys have been doing so extremely well. The other quick announcement that I want to just hit on is if some of you guys have been taking place in our Get Out of Your Head series that we've been doing, hosted by Jenny Allen, and my wife Kayla has kind of been leading this discussion, this Zoom group that's been meeting. The last session of this will be this coming Wednesday, and it's going to be at 8 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. So if you'd like to join via Zoom, watch for that link that will come out in our midweek email, and you can catch the last session of this. And I'm sure there's a way Kayla could get you caught up, with some of the other content that was shared and gone through. So the final thing is just what we talked about last week, in case you missed the teaching last week. This is our upcoming schedule. So here we are today, June 7th, and we have our online recorded conversation that we're going to turn you over to in a second with myself and John and Leslie. Next Sunday, we are looking forward to this. Let's just be praying for great weather, and we're going to do a drive-in service together out in our parking lot. see faces and just be out in God's creation and worship together and getting the Word together. So you will see a video go out next week that will give you more details about this, how we're going to do it, why cars, what we're going to do with kids, restroom issues, all that stuff. We'll address all that next week, so be watching for a video explaining all those details. And then the 21st, we're going to go back to an online live stream. And then the 28th, we'll do another outdoor drive-in service. July 5th, the holiday weekend, we'll do another online service. And then on July 12th, we're going to see where we're at with everything. And our hope is either to continue with outdoor, more natural gatherings, or to hopefully start to phase back into the building, depending on how our space and everything with all those details kind of pans out. So this at least gives you the next month and what you can look forward to. So will you please, just wherever you're at right now, and I know this can be weird doing this in your living rooms, but would you all please, even kiddos watching, would you just bow your heads with me for a minute right now? And I want to just take a second and pray for our country right now. We are just in the middle of a dark, dark time, and we need souls to be turned over to Jesus. We need people to see the hope of Jesus right now. We need to see true reconciliation and restoration happen in our country right now. And that's only going to happen if hearts and minds and spirits are submitted to Jesus. So let's just bow our heads for a few minutes and pray, and then we'll dive into this discussion. So God, I come before you right now, and Father, I know that I need to see others' perspectives. God, we're so quick to speak. We're so quick to post something on social media. We're so quick even to protest at times. And Lord, I pray that before we do those things, we would come before you. God, that you want to hear our voice, and that we would then listen, and we would slow down and be still. We would know that you're God, that you're in control. And God, that we would walk with integrity and humility and love and mercy and compassion and grace and all these characteristics that are you, Lord. And God, I just lift our country up to you right now. Father, I pray that there is a movement and a change in the reconciliation of races, that people, individuals, humanity can be seen as humanity. But Lord, forgive us for the way that we have gone about this. And God, I just pray for the riots and the looting and this stuff that's so counter what the message is supposed to be. And God, I pray for our law enforcement officers right now as they just struggle to maintain peace and order. I pray for their families, the wives, the husbands, the children that are so fearful as mom or dad leaves the home to go serve. And so God, we commit our country to you right now. God, we ask that you would wake up hearts, that you would convict people, that you would stop them in their tracks and let them see that what they're doing is evil. And God, that to protest a good thing is a good thing, but to destroy and to tear down is not accomplishing anything. And so God, would you just speak into our hearts right now. And as a faith family, may we help lead the way in our little spheres of influence. God, may we see different perspectives. May we lay our preferences down, and may we learn to love and live and lead more like Jesus every single day. Thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for John. I thank you for Leslie. I thank you for their lives. I thank you for the incredible insight, the honesty, the authenticity, the rawness that they are about to share with us. And God, I pray that we'd be able to take some of these practical tips and these ways that we need to reposture ourselves and that we would move forward with them to bring glory to your great name. So God, help us, be with us, heal our nation, heal our hearts, start within us, God. We love you. And all God's people said, amen. Amen. Hey, thanks. Enjoy this discussion, and we'll see you next week at 10 a.m. right here at One Mosaic in our parking lot. Enjoy this. Hey, welcome to our discussion this morning, and we're just going to jump into things. Things are a little bit different this morning, but different is good. And so I have two great friends joining me this morning, two friends that have come into my life in the last decade and have revealed a lot about my own heart and my own circumstances and understanding. So to my right here, we have Mr. John Torrence. And so John is a music teacher and Evergreen, and he's an awesome, talented man and leads worship for us, and also ministers to our young adults here at One Mosaic. And then to my far right over here, we have Miss Leslie Keane, Officer Leslie Keane, working with the Adrian Police Department, and just a super gifted individual who loves and serves humanity in a beautiful way. And so I am excited to dive into this conversation with you guys, because obviously where our world's at right now, we sit in a unique place to be here as a white man, a black man, and a female officer. And all three of us loving God. Our hope and our priority is that God is honored through this, but we want to speak to some of the things going on. We want to hear different perspectives, and we want to just dive into this conversation in a way that really honors God. So I just want to start for a quick minute of talking about a little bit of some of this that I've experienced in my own life, and getting to know John better and getting to know Leslie better. It's opened my eyes to see so much more of John's world and so much more of Leslie's world as an officer and as a female. And so I just want to speak to this really quick personally. When I think of racism in my own life, I was always taught to see no color, everybody's equal. Never felt like I was a racist person whatsoever. But I remember in middle school, we had an African American family that moved into my little hometown, and one of the daughters was in my grade, and I got to know her, and she was a beautiful individual, just a great family. But I watched over the course of a year the struggles that this family went through, and they made it 1 year in Blissfield before they left the town because of what was happening to them. And I even remember some of my classmates almost celebrating the departure of that family from our town. And as I've thought about this in lieu of everything that's been going on this week, it created just such a sadness and a brokenness in me, because I wasn't a voice speaking out in that regards, but I wasn't a voice speaking against what was going on too. And what I realized is, although I certainly don't see myself as racist, I also realized that I haven't done a good job to speak up about the injustice that we see in our world and in our country, and specifically towards different races. And so I just want to share that perspective of how that works for me, and understanding that there is privilege that I have just because of my skin color in America. And then to an officer's point of view, just a quick story of when I was in my mid-20s, and I was pulled over kind of late at night by an officer, and I remember just having such a flippant, annoyed attitude that this officer had the audacity on my way home to pull me over and question my speed and question what I was doing out that late at night. And so what I also see is, I see in probably the last 2 or 3 decades, there's been a decline in respect for authority in general, but also a decline in respect for our law enforcement officers that protect and serve our country day in and day out. And so we understand that there's flawed humanity in everything. There's flawed humanity in a white race, in a black race, in a Hispanic race. There's flawed humanity at the pastorate level, at the educator level, at the law enforcement level. There's evil that surrounds all of us. But part of what we want to do today is we want to speak into and allow your guys' perspective and voice to just be heard. Because I know for me, as I've gotten to hear both of your stories, it's been so enlightening to me, of moving me to a place where I feel like the world needs to start to move. Mm-hmm. So, John, I want to start with you, and if you could just kind of give me two things, a little bit of just how's your heart, how are you in the midst of everything that's unfolded in the last 10 days here, and then I'd love you to just speak into some of your experience in situations growing up, and even just in the last few years, even in Adrian, Michigan here.
Yeah, so even something that you had mentioned by saying that we're trying to be heard, like that's human, that's humanity. That's, I feel, one of the main things that is driving the wedge is people not being heard and people not listening. And so it's my prayer that that is where we would start throughout all of this. Trying to listen, trying to understand. Because like as I think about where I am, where my heart is, there's a lot of grief. This is it's a time of mourning. Everything has momentum. Like there's stuff that leads up to certain points, and after a while you get to a boiling point and boils over, and there's explosions and there's craziness, and it's just that. It's a response. It's how humanity, and we're witnessing it on a grand scale right now, and that is tragic. And I know that. I just know that God is grieving as well. His heart hurts because speaking from my perspective, just as a Christian man, it's like I just believe that God sees His children, and He just desires for us to be unified and us to see each other and to hear each other. So. Growing up, I grew up in a small town that was actually very similar to Adrian, and I think about there's only a few black families at the school that I went to, and there was a lot of I would say covert weirdness that I experienced at that level. It was not there was not. A lot of the overt, belligerent evil that you might see elsewhere. I mean, that happened too, but that's not the majority of what my experience is. And I do remember what it does to the heart to experience that, like and trying to justify it in your own heart, to know what exactly is happening at the moment. So you're talking about being pulled over. Like I remember when I was a 17-year-old boy, the first time I ever got pulled over, and I've told this story to a few friends and all that. So got pulled over. It was late at night. It was after like a roller skating rink gig, because people had roller skating. They're doing it. And so I'm driving home. It's around 1:30, and I'm swerving because I'm super tired. And an officer pulls me over, and this all makes sense to make sure that I'm not inebriated and all these things. And he comes up and he scans and he looks in the vehicle, sees me, and says license and registration. And I've already been taught how I need to speak to officers and how I need to, the kind of respect that I need to show, just because in every aspect like of my life, what I do does not reflect on just me or even my family name sometimes, especially in a small town like where I grew up. But it reflects on an entire people group, and it's not necessarily a thing about, oh, that's not fair. It's just the way things are, and so that was just how I was taught as a young boy. So 10 and 12, right? 10 and 2. There you go, not 10 and 12. And he asked for license and registration, and I go and grab it, and when I turn back, the barrel of the gun is pointed at my face, and the flashlight is also there blinding me. So I drop everything in a panic, and I freak out because I don't necessarily know that. I don't even know that this is not protocol, because this is my first time ever getting pulled over. And when I think back on this moment, I don't think of that officer as, like I was saying earlier, a belligerently racist human. But I do believe that there would be these stereotypes, this idea of this word, this phrase that you've heard a lot in recent days, systemic racism, that has been built up from time, just things that he was taught, things that he learned, things that he observed, that led him to make sure that he has the right amount of caution, the right amount of worry, because I might have been grabbing something or whatever. But at the same time, if he was an ounce more scared or an ounce more evil, honestly, and I would have been one of the names that you just hear about. I would have been one of the lives lost. And that hurts when I think back on that. Just because we all know and understand that's not that people are not out here and trying to be evil, but you have no idea if who you're coming across is somebody who's going to be dangerous or somebody who's maybe just a little misguided.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so let's go to Leslie and tell me a little bit, Leslie, about just how you're feeling this week, the weight of this week for you, how you're processing it, and then give us a little bit of your story leading you into law enforcement and some of the realities of your experience too as you serve and protect our county.
So this isn't the first time that this has happened in our world. It's happened before, and there's been civil unrest because of it. And honestly, I'm sad. I'm sad, and then I'm angered because I don't like to see the world in civil unrest. I don't like seeing people against each other, because that's not what I have in my heart. Now, as an officer, that's what people think. There are certain times where I pull people over and, I'm a racist, or I pulled them over because they have a beard, or, I made the traffic stop up. This stuff happens. And so when this happens, civil unrest, when bad souls do really bad things to good people, I know it's coming, and I hate it. I know that I have to watch my back. I know that officers will die, and it's not because they're evil people. It's because when a certain person does something, sometimes there are other certain people that will lump other people into this group.
Yeah. John used the word stereotype. Yeah. And in the same way, I can be stereotyped as a pastor, that I'm going to be this religious, judgmental, whatever, and you get stereotyped as the scary guy that could hurt you. You get stereotyped as you hate everyone of color, or whatever it may be.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I speak of certain people, I'm speaking of good souls versus bad souls.
Yeah. I love that language.
And because we have more good people out there, in my belief.
Yeah.
We have more good people than bad people.
That's what's in us.
And that just doesn't get displayed, which is unfortunate.
Mm.
So yeah, I was angry, I was upset, I was sad. I didn't know what to think. I don't know, I just sat kind of in silence trying to understand everything. And you know, what's going to happen over the next couple of months, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a female, you know, I've experienced just even outside of law enforcement, and this is where I'm starting to understand a little bit, is I've been denied 3 jobs. One was, I laughed at me, I was down to $200 to my name, and I went to a hospital, not around here, and the guy laughed at me and said, this job isn't for you. And so I walked out with $200 to my name trying to think, where am I going to go? I went to a factory, and I didn't even get an interview for that. And then just most recently, and this will go back to the officer part, I tried to look for a part-time job to pay off for some stuff that I'm trying to do in my life, and I didn't get the job specifically because I was an officer. And so that creates a bit of a riff, I guess.
Tension.
There's tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect word.
Yeah. So speaking of tension, one of the things that you have brought into my life that I love and appreciate so much is I have been able to watch for years your wrestle of being in some of the worst, darkest situations in humanity, but trying to bring light and trying to treat people with dignity, trying to love people as Jesus calls you to love people. And so speak to us just a little bit about that part of your wrestle, that battle daily, that how it wears on you and what that looks like and how you process it, and what does it look like at the end of the day when you walk away. And then I'm going to have John speak and lead us into a little bit of that systemic racism piece and unpack that.
So there are, I think I have a pretty decent relationship within the community. I'm not perfect by any means. But there are times where I make stops. You blow a red light, your tail light's out, whatever it is. I stop you, and I'm hoping this is what you're wanting me to kind of speak on, is there are times where I might, you know, want to just tell people, hey, your brake lights are out, but I'm automatically deemed a racist. And that triggers something inside of me, because I mean, even in college, a professor was telling that all white people were racist. And so it kind of, like, there was a deep, dark root that started in college. And so throughout my 18 years of law enforcement, when I hear that, when people tell me that I'm a racist, there's just this, you know, I want to love people, but at the same time, it's like I'm just getting punched in the gut. And it's not who I am. And over time, it becomes redundant. Like, it just I become immune to it, and it no longer has any meaning to it. And that's a sad thing, because I know that it exists.
Yeah.
But in my field, and I probably can speak on behalf of many officers, is a lot of us are really nice people, and we'll work with people. But man, you punch me in the face right with that racist remark. And I'm not just talking about the black community. It comes from Hispanic community. Like I said, it even comes from the white community.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to want to stay focused on being the good officer and not being taken over by just the hatred that I get on a daily basis. It is so hard. And then you listen to other officers and their stories, and it wears on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wears on you, wears you down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's the part that I never took into consideration. So in the same way that you feel that stereotype and that wearing down and that beating down and that judgment, John, you also have felt that a multitude of times.
Yeah.
And so speak to me about that and lead us into that idea of this systemic racism, this system that our world has created that has moved us in this direction.
Yeah, so it's culture. I mean, just tracing back history and looking into what you were saying as well with things that are taught to people, whether they know it or not, whether it's implicit or explicit. These are things that have become the kind of rotten building blocks of where we are as a society now. And so, I mean, in recent weeks, we've all seen it with like the Amy Cooper phone call and everything, and how she was. It's like dominoes, right? She was reaching from this imaginary toolkit of, I know that I can use these words, and my life isn't threatened, but I'm going to say that an African American man is threatening my life. I'm going to say that, and you're going to worry. Like, this was her angle. And so how would she know that using these words would mean something if she wasn't pulling from some grab bag? So that is part of that systemic piece that is just ingrained within society. That's one of those overt moments, right? And if we're looking back, you can hear and see that within, yes, the civil rights movement, but even further back, looking at the bombing of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. That's a big one in my mind. There are ways that we don't listen to one another, that we don't hear one another, that brings about this anger and this callousness. Like how you were saying, sometimes you just feel like you're getting punched in the gut time after time after time. Like I know that me and Julie have been spat at out of car windows, and she's been called honky, and I've been yelled at saying that I need to stay with my own race or stay with my own kind, and different things like that. In literally every city we've lived in, these kinds of things have happened to us. And it's the year 2020. Like this should not be a thing, but it is. There are perspectives that people have that are obviously distorted and perverted that we need to address. And the thing is, it is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. And it puts you in a weird and vulnerable space to talk to people about this kind of thing. Even if you're sitting at a family reunion or something, and there's your racist aunt says something, and you're like, oh, that is not okay. I'm not even gonna say a name because I'm literally not thinking of any particular person. But if I say a name, somebody's gonna be like, "What'd you say?" But no. So when somebody says a joke or something like that, to not just let that be a thing and be like, "Oh, that's just aunt," but to take the person to task and to talk to them that's an entire blanket statement over an entire people group that you're saying, and this would actually cause more damage than good. It's not worth a cheap laugh. So even in those small ways, addressing those things, if somebody's going to say something underhanded to just get a jab in and make people laugh or make people feel bad, like, good Lord, we are humans. We should be seeing these situations in a real and a serious light. We should see people with God's eyes, because they are his created children. You know, it's like he breathed life. In Psalm 139, talking about that we are beautifully, fearfully, wonderfully made. And it's my prayer that we would always see one another in those lights.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so well said. And I think it's important as we have this discussion, both as we look at race and we look at stereotypes for any people group, whether it's a job affiliation or whatever you do, that we have to understand that there is, and you've addressed this a little bit, there is both the sin of commission and the sin of omission. And so commission is that blatant sin that we see happening. It's someone yelling out the window at you. It's someone spitting in your face. But the sin of omission that I believe humanity is missing is we let those little undertones, those jokes, those comments just slide by without standing up and saying something and calling it for what it is and correcting that and making it different. And that takes boldness, and it takes a conviction in our heart that we're going to say, we are for one another, and we have to figure out how to do that as humanity. I was talking with Leslie earlier, and I just said this, we're going to get through this together thing that has kind of been the whole COVID mantra. You know, we're going to get through this together. I feel like it was really almost a precursor to where we're at right now. Because it's not about getting through COVID together. It's about this battle that we're fighting right now. It's not about a virus. It's about seeing humanity as humanity. It's about valuing every person's life equally and treating them that way and working for the betterment of other people. And so let's go into this a little bit of a discussion, trying to move into a practical side of things. John, when you see this, like, and this is fascinating to me when I think about this. We're only like 3 generations out from slavery in this country, which is crazy. This isn't like an ancient, you know, and we have to realize that, and that's part of what this systemic thing continues to be birthed out of. When you look at that and you look at this idea of systemic racism and how we view people, what are some practical things that we can start doing as humanity? We'll get to the Jesus piece in a minute, because ultimately we know that's where the answer lies. But what are just some practical things of how we start moving past?
So something that comes to my mind is a lot of the things, the struggles, the hardship, the unfairness, that stuff that comes up, that when I think about this subject matter, there are so many parallels with what women have gone through in this country, and when you think about a sense of darkness, a sense of the balance being very uneven. Like I was telling the story a little bit earlier about, you know, I played music in different events and different things like that. Going into this happened a few times, particular clubs that are like, you know, good old boys clubs, you know, or Elks clubs or something, whatever you want to say. Walking in and feeling this ice, like this, where people are looking and they're like, you don't really belong here, man. That kind of thing, where it's not quantified. You can't put it on a scale but you know it's there. It's real. You go through thinking about rights to humanity and all that. There's so much that's similar. So when I'm thinking practicality, you mentioned something about this, about how we're in the midst of COVID and all of these things that are going on. And let's look at this in the same way like a disease or a virus or something like that, where it starts off and you're left with a choice. You're told that this is a real thing. Do you ignore it? Or do you admit that this is me now, and now I need to make sure that I do everything that I can to get rid of this illness.
Or protect ourselves from getting it, from being infected by it.
Yeah. So if we do nothing, then it slowly or rapidly tears down and breaks things down, and parts of you die until everything is gone and wasted away. Or you can do things about it and be proactive and face things that are treatments that are uncomfortable, but you know that it will make you better. You know that this is something that will help. And one of these things in doing this is talking about it.
Yeah.
Opening it is so that it might feel like you're opening a wound or something, but there is good that can happen once it's exposed to light.
Yeah, that's good. Tell me a little bit about talking about it from your point of view, because we discussed a little bit before we started recording of just the importance of these conversations, as hard as they are. And even for the three of us who have done a lot of years together, we love each other, we're united through Christ. There's still an awkward, a tension to sit and have this conversation. But why, for you, Keane, why is it so important to talk about this? What does that look like from your perspective as an officer? What does this help to do?
Well, it's, number one, hard to talk to people about this topic because there are so many perspectives. And there's different values and different opinions, and one person grew up over here and another person grew up here, which makes it difficult to kind of see eye to eye. I think just through my counseling experience, my short stint counseling for about 8-9 years, I learned a really huge lesson, and that was I wasn't necessarily trying to, I was trying to educate the at-risk youth, but more so I was trying to educate the family itself, because that's where the root starts. And it just trickles down, and then you see the generation after generation after generation. You don't see the change because nobody's talking about it. Nobody's sitting down face to face and having that hard conversation because they're afraid. Maybe they expose things about themselves that might be hard to kind of swallow. And so I think educating not only the youth of the world, but the families itself. I think it also starts with educating not only the law enforcement. We're always like, got to train law enforcement, got to train law enforcement. Who's the one that punishes officers that make really poor choices? It's the higher ups. So you really have to educate, again, mom and dad, so that it trickles down and it's just there. Like the roots are there, the good roots. And so that you actually can see that this is happening, because there are people sometimes that don't realize that racism is happening, and it does. And it happens across the board for a lot of people. And so educating the higher ups for law enforcement, educating family, educating the youth, educating schools.
Huge.
Not only educating the teachers, but educating mom and dad of the schools, the higher ups. And then in general, the whole community needs to be educated, and hopefully reaching the families, that will hit a lot of people.
Yeah, that's so good. As you're sharing that, I think about, like, in marriage counseling, I have a lot of people that will come in and they'll be like, we're done. It's over. We're done. You know, what's going on? We can't do this anymore. Well, tell me what's going on. And they're like, I don't know. We've never fought, but all of a sudden they're done. And they've never fought because they've never dove into those hard things that's there that they need to talk about, they need to have conversation around. It's the giant elephant in the room that we have to call it out and go, there's an elephant. We got to talk about it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But when we do it, it unites us and it brings us together. And that's just the value for me personally of why I want to do this, is because I want anyone who listens to this and hears this to understand I've had hard, honest conversations with you that I had to hear and understand your perspective, your side of things, what you deal with, that I was completely unaware of. And it's made me a better person, and it makes me respect and see humanity in a truer, fuller, holistic light. John, same for you. You have brought in an incredible education into my world in this little town of Adrian to understand that this stuff is real and it still happens, and it has allowed me to see it in a different light, and it allows me to be more sensitive to it and aware of it and respectful to it. But that education piece absolutely has to happen.
That's how you build trust.
Tell me, you're an educator. How's that flesh out?
Yeah.
How do you do that? In your profession?
It's something that is always there, because I view my position, I view my job as a place where I could speak life into anybody that comes in through my classroom doors. That's my main, that I could find some way to build them up and to have like an all of life education with my students. And we talk about social justice issues, and within my class we talk a lot about history, just because I'm a music teacher, and so a lot of stuff goes hand in hand with what was going on throughout history. And so we speak to these things, and a lot of times we have discussions, critical thinking, especially with my 4th and 5th graders who are getting to that place where they can start to really get these more abstract thoughts and formalize who they are. I had told you guys this story earlier about a 3rd grade boy who spoke to me, and we have a good relationship, and there's a lot of goofing around and talking and everything. And he said, "My mom and dad say that all black people are mean, but I know that's not true because I know you." And so this child is hearing things from his parents, whom, by the way, I've had many conversations with in parent-teacher conferences. Awkward. So there's stuff that happens with him, within his mind, within his heart, that he hears these things, but he's able to block that and be like, that, I can't say that that's true because I know something different.
Yeah.
And so whereas that might seem like something small, he's going to carry that with him as he gets older.
That's a good soul.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. One of the things for me, I think a personal takeaway that I've seen in my life is proximity. It's this. It's when you entered into my life and we had proximity, and I got to understand your struggles, your feelings, your emotions, your perspective, your experiences, it raised an awareness to me. When we got proximal and you came into my life, it raised an awareness. And I think we tend to just gravitate towards everyone that looks like us, talks like us, thinks like us, and it's such a small little sliver of humanity that we engage in when God's made this absolutely beautiful, diverse humanity for us to learn from and engage in and do life with and become better people. And so I think proximity for me is just a gigantic thing. As you speak to the education piece, and it starts in homes, like parents, we have to get this, we have to have conversations, we have to talk about the value of humanity and what that looks like, and you speak to how that happens even in an education context, and getting people proximal with people that are different. One of the things that you also brought up that I want you to speak to for a minute is the idea of doing the next right thing. And what is that? Because I think that's a really practical thing.
Yeah.
And it seems overly simplistic, but what does that mean to you? And what has God kind of spoke into you with that idea of doing the next right thing?
So educating ourselves, being open about stepping into the uncomfortable conversations or moments, knowing that to move for good, for the greater good, it should take something. I think about we've hit a lot of these points as we've been having this conversation about standing up for people, about education, about being aware. It comes down to how we listen. It comes down to really hearing what the other is saying, because we are made to be in community with one another. We are made to be together. We are made to work together and make. That's God's vision. That's God's desire for us. That's Jesus' prayer for us, that we would be known by our love. And so that goes against division in so many ways. So I think about as people might want to debate and argue and fight, especially within the vapid wasteland that is social media, where everybody is author, publisher, and editor, and they just stand on the platform and say things. Things like that are not indicative of truly listening to one another. Truly listening. So when I think about doing the next right thing, that's the small moments that you face in your life, in your own spheres of influence. Being conscious, and it's a tiring thing. It's not something that is just like, oh yeah, it's just easy. You just no. There's times when you just want to just let it happen, let it slide, but we can't, because that is when the darkness starts to creep in again. If we can stay ever vigilant and speaking to one another and listening to one another and moving forward, knowing that we see each other as our brother and sister, I just feel like there is so much good that will come from that.
Yeah.
The next right thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. I think so often as humanity, and I'll be honest, I'm trying to discipline myself even in this. As we're doing this, I want to fully hear you, but we so quickly think about, what am I going to say back? Mm-hmm. It's a discipline of really hearing, listening,
sitting
engaging.
Within that.
Right. Yes. Of not, what am I going to say next? Because that's a selfish thing. What do I have to say? What's my response to what they're saying versus I just want to really listen and hear the heart, the essence of that person, and just sit in that for a while. And I think we do that even with God, right?
Yeah.
So much of our time in prayer, right, is us talking, God, hear this, I need this, I want this. And they can be all great requests, but we don't slow ourselves down to listen, to hear God, to be still and know. So just a couple thoughts. I just want to encourage us. John spoke really well about that idea of we're all, our author and our publisher and our editor with social media. And I think even to take a hiatus from social media right now would be a good thing. Amen. A good thing for all of us. We've thrown around at Mosaic this idea from time to time of don't feed yourself physically till you've fed yourself spiritually. And I just want to, my kind of last practical thing where we're land spiritually, we're going to try to get some spiritual application in here for us with this too, is I would encourage you to not post until you've prayed. I would encourage us, if we've been apart or we're thinking about even a protest, that you don't protest until you've prayed. That we would seek the face of God first. Because everybody wants to be heard. But a buddy of mine that I was talking with today, he posed this great question. He said, but who ultimately needs to hear our voice the most? And isn't it God that needs to hear our voice the most? And so before we post so that other people can hear our opinions, before we protest so other people can see our position, why are we not getting down on our knees before our Heavenly Father and praying to Him so that He can hear our heart, our anger, our frustration, that He would understand that. So I want to read just a piece of scripture that we've had on our board as we kind of wrap this time up and start to land the plane. But this is out of 2 Chronicles, chapter 7, verse 14.
Yeah.
This is something that we've talked through as a staff and as leadership here. And this is written on our whiteboard in our office at home. And it just says this: if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. And I think people take this scripture way too often and they take it out of context and they say, turn from their wicked ways, and they apply it to other people in their situations. But what this says is, if my people, if we would humble ourselves, if we would pray and seek God's face, and if we would turn from our wicked ways. And I know one of the absolute beauties and highlights of my week this week was our staff meeting and us having time, spending an hour out in front of this building, praying together and confessing our own injustices that we've done, the thoughts that we've had, the way we've been conditioned, our lack of education, our lack of compassion, our lack of empathy for people, and then praying for one another and coming around each other to do that. It was just a highlight of my week to see that. But we have to do that. We have to confess our wicked ways personally, and then God will hear that, and He'll move us to a place where healing in our land can really take place. So I don't know that this is so much a political problem as it's a person problem.
Yeah.
This is a humanity problem. It's
Amen.
Deep within our bones in humanity. We have sin nature, and the broken fracturedness that we experience, we're seeing it all over in our country. And we have to humble ourselves and come under the Lord and submit ourselves in that. So I want to just end with this. If I were to ask John right now and said, "Hey, can I have a $100 bill?" And he smiles and he doesn't give me $100. But Leslie, she's got a $100 bill, right? Nope, she got some cash, but she doesn't have a $100 bill. Here's the point of this: we cannot give what we do not possess, and we cannot offer forgiveness if we do not fully possess forgiveness. We cannot get to a place of true reconciliation if we have not been reconciled ourselves. We cannot get to a place of extending grace and love to one another if we truly have not had grace and love extended to us. We cannot get to a place where we can extend true hope if we have not had hope extended to us, if we are not a recipient of that hope, if we don't have that hope. And so that's where I believe the gospel message of Jesus comes in and says, I offer true forgiveness, true reconciliation, repentance, love, grace, compassion. And we need to embrace that and step into that as humanity so that we can start to move things forward and become better people together. And so, Leslie and John, I just want to thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being incredible humans that are fighting for a cause that's so much bigger than your individual cause. Thank you for the love and the compassion and the empathy that you have displayed so beautifully towards one another, towards our people, towards myself. And I just pray that as people see this and they see your heart and your position and they understand your experiences still better, that they would have a heart of compassion for where you guys both come from and the experiences and the reality that you live in, but they would also be moved and shaped and stirred by the God that lives and dwells in both of you, that gives you the power to see people for who they are, to overcome the comments, the slander, the slurs that happen, that you can see that there's a better calling for us as humanity to come together and to be one and to be united. But Jesus is the one that does that. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in this discussion. I know these two individuals would love to have any kind of further dialogue with any of you at any time. I also would at any time. If you want to step into this conversation further, that is our call, that we need to take this conversation further. We need to continue to have it. We need to extend that grace and that love and that humility, but we need to first accept that in our own lives in a relationship with Christ, the one who created us. So thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. We love you all. Grace and peace be with you all.